Welcome to the Megalopolitan Podcast. I'm David C. Fisher. Well, the war in Iran is in its 20th day now, and we're hearing about all of these ugly choices that have to be made. The story is centering around the Strait of Hormuz and what the administration needs to do to make sure that shipping is safe and that Iran is unable to export its oil, which will provide an income for prosecuting the war. And there's conversation about Karg Island, which is this island. It's actually in the Strait of Hormuz, the narrowest part of the waterway between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, which goes to the Indian Ocean. Karg Island has an enormous oil terminal, which is the departure point for 90% of Iran's export oil. And it's this vast compound of oil tanks and embarkation terminals and shipping ports. And it's where Iran sends about 1.5 million barrels a day of its oil overseas, almost entirely to China. And the other day, the United States hit the military base that's on the island. Didn't touch the oil facilities, but hit the military base, which is part of the campaign. The air campaign is to reduce Iran's military capability everywhere it exists in Iran. They hit the military base, but that also sent a message to Iran. We know about Karg Island. We know that you're going to want to defend it. We know that it's a source of your income. And now there's talk about turning this into an oil war. What if we simply blew up Iran's ability to produce and export oil? What if we sent Marines ashore and seized Karg Island, and instead of destroying the terminal, took control of it and kept Iran from exporting oil and generating income? What if we seized Iranian shipping overseas? Like once the tankers had left the Persian Gulf, we could seize them on the high seas. This would punish China. Oh boy, we can keep Iran from generating income, and we can punish China. All of these are bad ideas. And I'm really hoping that the talk that's going around is just bluster and just designed to make Iran nervous and deploy troops and forces in the wrong places, because the air war is working. The air war is the war that we're supposed to be fighting here. The air war is systematically reducing Iran's ability militarily to do anything, and more, reducing its ability to suppress the people of Iran. That's the mission. Everything else is a distraction. If you seize oil shipments on the high seas, now you're involving a third party. If Iran is sending oil to China and you stop that shipment and seize the oil, now you've taken something away from China. And there are all these rules about what goes on the high seas. It's a distraction. It's unnecessary. You put boots on the ground in Karg Island, the Iranians are going to shoot at them, or they're going to blow something up, or the terminal's going to something's going to go on. Whatever else happens, it's a broken promise. It's boots on the ground. And this administration very properly said, no boots on the ground. It's unnecessary. We're not in Iran to punish China. We're not in Iran to blow up their oil production capability. We're not in Iran to seize their oil terminals. We don't need to. If they continue shipping 1.5 million barrels a day, let them do it. Yes, it's income for them, but it's never going to compensate for what they're losing day after day after day. Those airstrikes on their military facilities, on their IRGC facilities, on the police stations, on the depots, on the manufacturing of the missiles and the drones and the mines. It's taking a toll every day. That's the war we're fighting, and that's the war we need to keep fighting and concentrate on it without distraction. The other conversation, and boy, Donald Trump, sometimes you really want to just turn off the microphone on Donald Trump. He has been criticizing NATO allies because he's been going around asking them to provide naval ships to escort shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. So the oil distribution to the rest of the world, the global oil markets aren't disrupted by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And, everybody's saying no. Of course they're saying no. He's inviting them to get themselves in a war that they don't want and they didn't ask for and they weren't consulted about in the first place. The United States and Israel started this war, and it was entirely predictable that the Strait of Hormuz would be harassed by the Iranians, that it would likely be closed to much shipping traffic. Not all. The Iranians are sort of controlling the traffic. The Iranian ships are still moving. They're allowing Indian ships, Pakistani ships. They're kind of, deciding who gets to go through. Most of it's not. But to the extent that it is, let it go through. And, this talk about escorts, it's another one of these things that people just say and with no explanation. What do you mean by escorting ships through the Gulf of Hormuz? Well, naval escorts of commercial shipping, oil tankers, things like that. How does that work? Well, in World War I, they used to have naval ships escorting commercial shipping and passenger shipping across the Atlantic because there were German submarines, fighting World War I, and they would surface and fire torpedoes. Well, the Navy ships made sense because when the submarines surfaced, they could fire on the submarines and protect the shipping. Different situation in Iran. That's not what's going on at all. In the 1980s, there was an 8-year war between Iraq and Iran. And there was an element of it where they started attacking each other's oil tankers in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. And neutral country oil tankers were getting caught in the crossfire. And the United States wanted to protect, global oil supplies. So American naval vessels were escorting ships through the Persian Gulf. And that made sense because America was a neutral and the ships were neutral. And both Iraq and Iran knew that if they fired on one of those ships or on an American naval vessel, that would bring America into the war, which nobody wanted. Here we're in a completely different situation. Iran is indiscriminately firing on any ship that they don't like and they don't want going through the Strait of Hormuz. And as I said last time, they don't need to do much. They don't have to sink every ship in sight. They fire on a few ships, they start some fires, they scare the shippers, and the insurance rates go through the roof. The insurance companies won't insure the ships going through the Strait of Hormuz because it's too risky. And that's understandable. So how do you solve that? By getting, say, France to escort ships through the Persian Gulf. You've got a French destroyer sailing next to an Australian oil tanker, and what's it going to do? The Iranians fire a missile at the tanker. They hit it. They don't hit it. The Australian ship maybe intercepts it, maybe doesn't. But what does that solve? You can't fire back at the Iranians because it's an unseen missile launcher somewhere. And a shot's been fired. It had to be intercepted. That's a risky environment. The insurance companies aren't going to insure that environment. It doesn't solve anything. And none of the allies want to be in that situation. Australia, France, Britain, they contributing Navy ships into this situation at this time just asks for trouble. It just asks for ending up being in the war. They don't want to be in the war. That's understandable. We started this war, and we really shouldn't panic when the things that inevitably happen. The Iranians are exercising their leverage over the Strait of Hormuz. Again, let Iranian do their shipping. Let them allow Pakistani shipping and Indian shipping. Let them do whatever they want with the Strait of Hormuz. Continue the bombing campaign. reduce their military, reduce the control of the IRGC, and let the process work. It's a process that works. What to look for is cracks in the IRGC, divisions between the traditional army, the Artesh, and the IRGC, and the people of Iran starting to rise up again. There are small indications of all of this happening already. It's small. Don't get excited. The regime isn't going to fall tomorrow. But it may well fall soon. It's not an unreasonable hope. Don't expect it. It's still a bit of a long shot. But in the meantime, Iran is being defanged. The world is not objecting to it, although, the economic consequences are not pleasant. And it's the war that we started and that we embarked upon. And we're 3 weeks in. And as I said last time, the examples we can look for in history are Kosovo, Serbia in 1999, and Libya. In both cases, an air war supporting forces on the ground that were in a position to overthrow a regime succeeded in enabling those forces to overthrow the regime. But in Serbia, it took 78 days. In Libya, it took 7 months. But here's the thing. Here's the other thing. The war we're looking at now is not the war we're going to be looking at a month, 2 months, 3 months from now if it's still going on. The early days of the war are the most intense, the most violent, has the most footage of things blowing up and things burning down, and it's the most expensive. The first days of the war, the U.S. military spent $2.5 billion in the first couple of days because the Iranians were firing back with everything they had. Those missiles had to be shot down. Missiles had to be fired in to knock out their missile batteries. Missiles are expensive. A Patriot missile is $4 million. One of those THAAD missiles, the high altitude ones, they're $12 million. You go through a lot of money in the early days of missile war. Every day that goes by, the United States is continuing to knock out Iran's ability to fire anything back at us or the other countries in the Persian Gulf. And you keep hearing the number 90%. They're like 90% down from the first days of the war. And they've been saying that for days. It's hard to count the numbers, but it's certainly every day they are less able to respond in any way to the attacks that are coming from the United States and Israel. And those attacks are effective. Missile bases that are wiped out are wiped out. No more missiles coming out of there. Political heads and IRGC heads who are killed, yes, they're replaced by, the next successor in the org chart. But, you keep moving down that org chart and the successors are less and less experienced. There's less and less command and control. There's less and less communication among the regime forces. And you're gradually wearing the system down. And the Iranian people, if they're motivated, they may decide to do it, they may not. But they have come out in force before, recently, 5 million of them. If that can happen again with an IRGC that is as reduced and dispirited and disorganized as it is now, a regime change may well happen. In the meantime, all that offensive capability that has worried the Persian Gulf neighborhood for years is being reduced. It's all worth doing. But we need to concentrate on it. We need to do that and not this boots on the ground, blowing up oil fields. None of that matters. Iran's income is not going to overcome the crushing blows of what we're doing. The Israelis are doing quite well. The Israelis are concentrating more than we are on decapitation strikes, on the leaders of the regime, of the IRGC, and the religious establishment. they had a good week. There were really like 6 or 8 leading commanders, including Ali Larijani, who's the former Speaker of Parliament and is a real insider, and a really top political figure. And the Israelis came into some criticism because this is a guy who, if the war came down to negotiations, he was possibly somebody who could bridge the gap between the extremists and the outside, maybe, if he was included in the negotiations. But the Israelis aren't interested in negotiations. They want these people dead, and they're going to wipe them out. That's really not something we have control over. The Israelis have, to some extent, their own separate agenda, and they're going to do what they consider important. And I got to believe, although I don't have any inside knowledge, the Israelis have a lot more on-the-ground intelligence in Iran than we do. The Mossad is a very capable intelligence agency, the Israeli version of the CIA, and you're not getting people like Ali Larijani or Gholam Reza Soleimani, who is the Basij militia commander. He was killed too. You're not getting them without inside intelligence. They may have people embedded in the regime or around the regime. They're getting intelligence that is making them able to get the people who really matter. And again, they're working their way down the org chart. The IRGC can say, oh, well, we have redundancy, we have successors, we have a lot of depth. You can't just assassinate your way into crushing our regime. But, with consistent ongoing determination, I think you can. So there's a bit of false urgency going on here. And this is really something to think about. Right now, day 20, about 3 weeks in, this is the hardest part emotionally. Because the early days of the war, it's all kind of exciting. The bombs are falling. We're finally fighting the Iranians. We're doing something that may actually remove this horrible regime from the world. Time goes by. The war goes on. There's no regime falling. There's a new supreme leader. The IRGC commanders are giving press conferences. They're appearing in interviews and like Al Jazeera. It seems like nothing's happening. Plenty is happening. But time is going by. And I wonder if President Trump is thinking, for one thing, when asked how long this would take, he said, well, it might take 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, well, we're in week 3. And if he's starting to worry about, I'm not going to be done in 4 to 6 weeks, then he shouldn't have said 4 to 6 weeks, because you can't put a war on a political clock. The war is going to take however long the war takes. And he shouldn't be diverted. We shouldn't be diverted. It's hard to stick through something that seems to be lasting forever, but it's not going to last forever. And the longer it goes, the less intense it's going to be. The opening days of the war was, explosions and whiz bang and, rockets flying and things burning down. In the weeks to come, it's going to be more and more occasional, episodic precision strikes, jets in the air, not missiles flying en masse. Precision strikes, this base was hit, this leader was killed, this control system was brought down. And, we'll see what the people do, what the IRGC does, what the Artesh does. And it may well drop off the headlines, as things do when they become less intense, more ordinary, and the discipline and the process, following the process, continues. Think about it. Think about the news. You remember, I was reading in the paper, I was reading online. Remember Doge? Remember the early days of the Trump presidency when Doge was crashing around and closing agencies, and Elon Musk with a chainsaw running around and all this stuff, and it was all over the headlines, and people were going crazy about it. And I think a lot of people feel like Doge disappeared, like it died, like it just everybody hated it, so it went away. No, look it up. Doge is still going on, still doing what it does. It's out there identifying fraud and working on government efficiency, and it's saving billions and billions of dollars. It's just time has gone by. It's fallen off the headlines. It's not doing the loud, raucous things. It's doing day-to-day government efficiency work. You remember the ICE raids in Minnesota? It was people are dying, people are protesting, lawsuits are being filed. It was a big crisis. Well, the Bovino was replaced with Homan. Things calmed down. Kristi Noem was let go. They brought in the senator from Oklahoma to replace her. You're kind of not hearing about that anymore. ICE is still out there. Deportations are still going on. The news cycle has moved on from it. To some extent, even this war is going to go through something like that. In the weeks to come, it won't be this loud, exploding things, big headlines every day, but it'll still be going on. And I hope it'll be going on until the regime is either gone or it's really concludable that we can't do it, that the elements aren't in place, that the people aren't going to overthrow the regime. The regime is too deep and too entrenched and too brutal. The army is not going to break away. If enough stress can't break the pieces apart, then we'll have to give up. Declare victory and leave a country that will be, very greatly reduced as a threat, and that's worthwhile. But we can't make decisions and pivots and boots on the ground and like these grand changes of strategy because there are midterms coming up or because Donald Trump said we'd be done in 6 weeks. That can't be. That mustn't be the way this goes. This is doable. It's worth doing, and it's a process. So we're moving through the process. Now, I want to talk about this guy, George Kent, who was the head of counterterrorism for the State Department. And he resigned this week with a screed about, I can't support this war anymore. Donald Trump was duped into it. The Israelis conducted this disinformation campaign that convinced Donald Trump that this war would be over in a day or 2 days. And that's why we're in it. And it's there was no imminent threat. Why are we in a war? There was no imminent threat. So this got a lot of people thinking about it's a good point. Like, why are we in a war if there's no threat? It was, can we trust that the president made a right decision and so on? Okay. There was no imminent threat. I don't think anybody, at least I had no illusion that Iran was on the brink of nuking the United States or anyone else. Iran went through a punishing war against Israel back in June. They took 12 days of, brutal punishment without really being able to respond. The United States went in at the last minute and dropped the bunker buster bombs on the nuclear sites, and it was over. And Donald Trump probably, really overspoke when he said, well, we've completely obliterated their nuclear program. Well, we don't know that. We don't know where all the facilities are, where all the nuclear material is, but we certainly set them back. And their capability was certainly reduced. And I don't think anybody really thought that 3 weeks ago Iran was on the brink of a major attack on the United States. I mean, what may well have happened is that the Israelis, Netanyahu went to Donald Trump and said, "Look, turns out Iran is, a paper tiger. That 12-day war was like pathetic. We took a lot of stuff out, and they really weren't able to respond very well. You guys, the United States, you dropped those bombs on the nuclear sites. They're weak. They're the people just 2 months ago, they were rioting in the streets. There were 5 million people rioting, talking about down with the Ayatollah. I think Netanyahu told Trump, like, look, now's the time. Let's do this now. Why wait until they're a strong threat? Now's the time. They've had this coming for 45 years. And, we've got Mossad in country. We know where their leaders are. We can decapitate them. Maybe we can get this regime out. Now, even if George Kent is right, even if, Israel launched some vast disinformation campaign on Donald Trump, guaranteeing to him that, we could have the regime gone in 3 days, no government's going to act on that. I mean, I'm sure the administration would love to have had this over in 3 days. You knock out the supreme leader on day one, there's confusion, the regime collapses, hooray. That would have been nice, but no war planner goes into a major operation like this assuming 100% that the best case scenario is going to happen. That's dumb. No, 100 generals would tell him, Mr. President, no. If you start launching missiles at Iran, you've got to be ready to go the distance. You've got to be ready for what's coming back. You've got to be ready for the unknown. You've got to be ready for, global opinion and what happens with the economy. The Strait of Hormuz closing. There is no way that any disinformation campaign convinced the United States government that Iran was definitely going to fall in 3 days. And the proof of that is the campaign that's going on now. This is not a campaign that threw 2,000 missiles at Iran and the government didn't fall in the first 3 days. So everybody said, well, what do we do now? What do we do now? Like, it didn't fall. What do we do? That's not what's going on. There is a systematic daily target list that we are running through in a coordinated and organized way toward creating an environment where the regime may fall. And if it doesn't fall, still, it's a comprehensive defanging of the Iranian nation. That's not the planning of a country that assumes that it's all going to go well in the first 3 days and it'll all be over. So, I don't know George Kent. He's a veteran and an intelligence and securities, expert, and with access to lots of, confidential knowledge. I don't know what he knows, but there isn't any government that's going to be convinced that, a war is achievable in 3 days and bank on that to the exclusion of all other possibilities. No way. So, as I said last week, this is a war. Any war is a psychological war. And what we're doing here is creating an environment. We're creating a weather system over Iran. Missiles, bombs, fighter planes are attacking government institutions, missile bases, drone factories, depots, every day. It's just a systematic reduction of everything. And the longer it goes on, the more inevitable and eternal and depressingly inexorable it is, the better for everybody, because the IRGC will come apart. Unless it doesn't. And, and the people will come out in the streets in the force that they did 2 months ago, and this time they'll be able to win. Or they won't. If they do, great. If they don't, then, we've done what we can do. And it's not a defeat, and it's not giving up to leave it at that. Iran was not an imminent, tomorrow they're going to blow us up threat. Fair enough. They were a constant, decades-long, irritant and agitator and threat to everybody. And they had this coming. And now that they've got it, they've really shown their colors. They're attacking like everybody everywhere just to create global misery so that their repressive, murderous, miserable death cult of a regime can survive. And, just to prove, what they're all about, they executed this poor kid, 19-year-old champion wrestler, who was, arrested for speaking out against the government. And, the United States kind of let them know, look, you better not execute him. They hung him in public, in a big spectacle, just so everybody knows how, don't speak out against the government. It's not good for your health. The Allies are still with us. They're not escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz, but they're on our side and they wish us well. And President Trump had a meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan today, and I think he pressured her too to provide ships for escorting tankers through the Persian Gulf, and she declined very politely, and let the world know that Japan is really more concerned with China as a regional threat, with Taiwan, and there are real concerns over there, and we should all be thinking about China's watching this thing just like they're watching the Ukraine, to see how determined the Allies are, to see how well they fight and how far they're willing to go, and to see perhaps, just how much have we reduced our stockpiles of missiles and ammunition, and how long will it take us to rebuild those stockpiles? And they're probably working out, how many months does that give us to move on Taiwan if we want to. Maybe they're not that close to ready, but, China is the real global adversary right now. Iran is a linchpin for sure, but China is the one to keep an eye on, and that's what the Japanese Prime Minister was reminding Donald Trump of. But she did, she did go out of her way to say, remarkably, she said, Mr. Donald, you are the one to bring peace to the world if anyone can do it. It was amazing. It's an amazing thing for her to say. And, we'll see if that's true. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Megalopolitan. I will see you next time. I'm David C. Fisher.